What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with Call of Duty World War II coming out in just a couple weeks now, and Infinite Warfare's realistic life cycle coming to an end, it's time to have a look back at the year. And this time around, instead of doing a final review like I've been doing for like every year since I started doing YouTube with Call of Duty, I decided to just change up the format into two different videos, what the game did right, as well as what the game did wrong. In today's video, we're going to be having a look at what Infinite Warfare did right. Of course, this means today's video is going to be focusing on the positive aspects. I know a lot of people out there just can't stand it when you talk about positive things, so this is the positive one. Don't worry, there will be one coming within the next week or so about what Infinite Warfare did wrong. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so starting this off, there's one disclaimer I have to put here. For all those people that can't understand what an opinion is, this is going to be an extremely subjective video. A lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, yes, it's going to be stuff that they objectively did great on. Like, you can't really argue that it was a bad thing that they did. But for a bunch of these things I'm going to be mentioning, it's simply stuff that I enjoy, that works with my playstyle, works with my preferences. Absolutely feel free to disagree. I am sure a lot of people are going to disagree with certain things that I say. All that I ask is please actually flesh out your ideas in the comment. Explain why you disagree. So, starting it off, keeping in mind this is no particular order, the movement. To me at least, out of all of the advanced movement Call of Duties, Infinite Warfare has the most polished movement system. It's smooth and very intuitive, unlike Advanced Warfare. I felt like Advanced Warfare's advanced movement, it was a little bit jerky, and it's also really hard to get a feel for new players that are just coming into the game. Whereas Infinite Warfare, as well as Black Ops 3, it's a much smoother transition. There's more of an arc to your jump rather than quick jumps within your jump. And I like that overall feeling, but then when I compare Black Ops 3 to Infinite Warfare, I feel like Infinite Warfare smoothed things out a little bit better than Black Ops 3, and they made it just feel great. For somebody that enjoys advanced movement, which I know isn't for everybody, I felt like Infinity Ward handled it best. Moving on to the next thing that I think Infinite Warfare did great with, this is overall weapon balance. As much as you see people complain about certain guns like, let's just say the NV4 or the K-Bar, when you really break it down, you look at it statistically, and you actually give other guns an honest go and learn how to use them well, the weapon balance in this game is one of the best in the Call of Duty franchise, in my opinion. Is it 100% perfect? No, you're never going to achieve perfect weapon balance with so many guns in a game, unless you start making those guns basically statistically identical. Having said this, at this point in the game's life cycle, I can confidently pick up any primary weapon and not feel like I'm being held back to any significant extent. Will I do a little bit better with some weapons compared to others? Absolutely. But the real key here is I don't really feel like I'm holding myself back by using some of the guns that would be considered to be lower tier. So overall, throughout the year, with the exception of those couple weeks where we had VPR warfare, and yes, the VPR was completely overbuffed for those couple of weeks, weapon balance has been excellent in Infinite Warfare. Moving on to the next thing that Infinity Ward did great with this game, in my opinion, this is their supply drop system, as well as how they handle new guns being added to the game, or post-launch DLC weapons. With the supply drops, this was a huge step in the right direction coming off of Black Ops 3. It's much more consumer friendly. We have the ability to have that salvage, which allows us to craft the variants that we want, rather than just getting them luckily out of supply drops. And then when new guns were added, like completely new guns, not new variants, everybody had access to the base variants for free. If you're a Season Pass holder, you get it immediately. If you're not a Season Pass holder, you grind out a relatively simple challenge that should take you no more than a couple hours of gameplay time, and then you've got that gun as well. Comparing that to Black Ops 3, it's night and day difference. With Black Ops 3, there is no way to earn the gun you want. You have to get lucky with the gun you want. Even with triple plays, which for a lot of the average players can take weeks to get, it's still going to be rolling the dice. I understand that they locked the variants behind the Quartermaster collection because they still want to sell their supply drops. I think that's a fair trade-off. Everybody still gets access to the base weapon, so it's not like you're completely out of the loop with that weapon. And in exchange for that, they lock the variants behind the Quartermaster collection. That felt like a fair enough trade-off to me coming off of Black Ops 3. Moving on to the next thing that Infinite Warfare did right, in my opinion, this is overall perk balance. I think it's actually the best that we've seen in several years, because I can't really think of a true crutch perk in this game. Even though I tend to use a lot of the same perks because those are the perks that just suit my particular playstyle, if you were to take away all of my perks, I wouldn't feel like I'm suddenly being put at an extreme disadvantage. I can't say the same thing for a lot of the previous Call of Duty games. In the past, we had crutch perks like Toughness, where you pretty much need that for face-to-face gunfights, otherwise you're going to be losing those face-to-face gunfights because of the flinch. In Infinite Warfare, they lowered the base flinch so that Hardened isn't really necessary, plus Hardened doesn't help as much for regular guns, more so just sniper rifles. So there you go, they eliminated that crutch perk. Then we have Fast Hands or Gung Ho, basically the perk that reduces your sprint out time. In Infinite Warfare, Gung Ho still does reduce your sprint out time, but it's not needed by any means because the base sprint out time is overall faster. The one perk that I feel they should have handled a little bit differently is Ghost. I wish they would have made Ghost like Black Ops 3 where it only works while you're moving, but even then, take away my Ghost perk and I don't feel like I'm being put at a significant disadvantage. I just have to think a little bit more about my flank routes. So in general, perks in this game are finally just that. They are perks. You don't need them, but they are nice to have and they will give you little buffs in certain areas and in certain situations. This brings us to the next point that Infinite Warfare did right. Keeping in mind this one is very subjective. This is overall map design. I'm going to be focusing mainly on the base maps. There are definitely a few DLC maps that I can't stand. I'm looking at you for. I can't think of a single base map in this game where when it gets voted for, I think to myself, oh crap, I really don't want to play this map. No matter which one of the base maps that gets voted for, I'm thinking, great, okay, what's the game plan here? I can't say the same thing with a lot of the previous Call of Duty games. With almost every other Call of Duty game, there's always those like 2 to 3 maps where I just can't stand when they pop up in rotation and they get voted for. For some of them, it even gets to the point where I just back out of the lobby that I was otherwise going to play, but I just don't want to experience that map. There isn't a single base map in Infinite Warfare that makes me feel that way. Getting into the specifics of the map, I like that with every one of the maps, there are tons of places that you can wall run and really take advantage of that advanced movement. In Black Ops 3, I felt like wall runs were just used as a tactical option in certain situations, which I know a lot of people prefer that, but for me, I like the fact that at any given point, I usually have an option to jump onto a wall run and use that to my advantage at some point in an upcoming situation. The advanced movement generally isn't needed to traverse the maps in Infinite Warfare, but it's always there as an option to use if you choose to. In addition to this, I feel like the lanes and the lines of sight generally in this game were very well thought out. Almost every power position in this game has an excellent counter spot to it, and you could tell with a lot of these maps they were designed with competitive in mind, which again, this is a very subjective area. I personally really prefer these more balanced, well thought out maps where everything is there for a reason. But I know there's a lot of people that don't share that opinion with me. One last thing to mention about map design is just the overall aesthetics and the color palette that they used. I love that they have colorful maps, they have a very wide variety of different themes and locations, and personally, I think this is great. There's never a dull moment when it comes to the aesthetics of these maps. Moving on to the next thing that Infinite Warfare did right, or at least that they made an improvement on from Black Ops 3, this is the combat rigs. Now, I will say that I would prefer a game without these combat rigs, or at least without the weapons attached to these combat rigs. The abilities, I think, are generally just fine. I don't like combat rigged weapons, but having said that, I think they did a much better job on average compared to Black Ops 3. There are a couple exceptions. I think Micro Turret could be toned down a little bit from its current state, just make it so it doesn't lock on quite as fast. Other than that, though, they're pretty easy to deal with. They're just a bit of an annoyance. And Synaptic. I think Synaptic really just shouldn't have had the propulsion trait attached to it. That should have either been a perk or it shouldn't have been in the game at all. Aside from that, I think they did a much better job with the combat rigs compared to Black Ops 3 Specialists, because I feel like there's generally a lot more counterplay with these rigs. I'm looking back to Black Ops 3's gravity spikes, for instance. Most of the time, there's no countering it, and there's no skill really involved in using it. You just run into a room, hit 2 buttons, and everybody around you is dead. There's really nothing they could do about it unless they were already aimed at you and shooting at you, in which case, maybe they'll shut you down before you land. A similar thing sort of goes with the Purifier in that game. You could just walk into a room, spin around really quickly on a high sensitivity, and all you have to do is touch them with that flame, and they're dead. In Infinite Warfare, I really never felt like I was at such a significant disadvantage against combat rig abilities and power weapons. Initially, I was extremely skeptical about things like phase shift, but it turns out phase shift is actually just really fun to use, and it's really easy to counter as well and predict. When you see somebody phase shift these days, most of the time you know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to go to the nearest corner, trying to get behind you. You can just pre-aim that corner and shoot them when they come out of phase shift for a free kill. So overall with rigs, even though I'm not a huge fan of the rig weapons, I think Infinity Ward in general did a great job with them. Next up for something Infinite Warfare did great with this year, this is having featured modes as well as various events and things throughout the year to keep people coming back and keep some variety within the game throughout the whole life cycle. I'm looking at the different weekly modes that we had access to. Instead of having those just as a random mode that's always in the game that people would pretty much never play because it's kind of a gimmicky mode on the side, they turned it into a featured mode so that way when that feature mode pops up, people want to play it, people want to hop on, and it generally has a decent population playing it. Also, developing things like Gesture Warfare. I think Gesture Warfare was a great addition to this game. As silly as it looks, it's so much fun, and it's such an enjoyable, just on-the-side sort of experience. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before in a shooter, or at least that I can think of, and I just thought it was great for a side mode. In addition to that, we constantly had double XP throughout the year, we had double keys every now and then, we had those like quad feed times where we'd have all kinds of double everything, and then we had events like Days of Summer, and now we have the Halloween Scream event going on. And I realized Days of Summer was across multiple Call of Duty titles, but still, there was lots of events that were going on throughout the life cycle of Infinite Warfare, and I thought that was great, so they did an excellent job supporting that kind of stuff. Next up, for another thing that Infinite Warfare did right that I wasn't expecting at all throughout this year, this is score streak variants. I was a little bit skeptical at first when they announced these score streak variants, then when I found out they were unlocked with salvage, which you get through playtime, and also when I saw what the perks were for these score streaks and how pretty much all of them had an upside as well as a downside to keep them balanced, I thought it was great. It just added more variety to the score streaks that you can use. It allowed you to tailor those score streaks to what you prefer without making any one of those score streak variants completely overpowered. So score streak variants overall I think were a good thing, especially the way they handled them and added them to the game. Next up, something Infinite Warfare did amazing with that no other Call of Duty so far has done, and actually not very many games out there have done, is what they did with loading times. The loading times in this game are incredibly fast. I love that first off, when you boot up the game, you can actually skip all the logos and everything like that. Like, we get it. Activision's the publisher, Infinity Ward and Raven were developing it. We get it. We don't need to see that every single time we boot up the game. I'm glad we can skip that, but more importantly, the map loading times and the way they handled it where the map actually loads in the background when you're in the lobby so that when the countdown completes, you're pretty much right into the game. Very seamless transitions. I loved what they did there, and I was really hoping they'd follow suit for World War II. So far, it doesn't look like they're going that way, but then again, we've only played a beta build, so I'm still kind of crossing my fingers for that one. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention for multiplayer before we get into a little bit of campaign and zombies. We're not going to be discussing those too much. But the one last thing I want to talk about for multiplayer is something that is very different for every single person out there. Everybody has a different experience in this area. This is connections. For me, in Infinite Warfare, connections have been near flawless most of the time. Now, of course, some lobbies are a little bit laggy, some other people are a little bit laggy. I have had packet loss here and there that has actually affected the outcome of the gunfight, even though most of the time when I get packet loss, it doesn't actually cause any issues. But in general, especially when I'm playing solo and not with people that are all around the world, connections have been amazing. Hit detection has felt great. I've had very few issues in this area. Of course, I am absolutely not trying to speak for everybody when I say this. Everybody has a different experience, like I said, so just because I said that I have an amazing experience doesn't mean that other people out there weren't having a bad experience, but I can really only speak to my own, and it was great. I also like that they added the network icons above the kill feed. Great addition to Call of Duty. Glad that we're seeing that coming back in COD World War II, at least on the PC build. I don't know if we saw that in the console build. I don't think we did see it in the console build, but we might. I hope we do, because it is great to know if you were having like packet loss or something in that last gunfight, if that was the cause of you losing it, or if it was you just missing shots. So that's pretty much everything we're going to cover for multiplayer. As for campaign, this is something that I honestly can't really speak to because I never did complete the campaign. And it's not because the campaign was bad and I couldn't get into it or anything. It was more so I don't have the time to cover campaign because my entire focus, my entire job is multiplayer Call of Duty. And therefore, anytime I'm playing the game, it's multiplayer because it's going to be either for streaming or for videos. So I can't speak to it, but I will say it is one of the best received Call of Duty campaigns that I've seen in a very long time. I almost never hear any negativity towards the campaign of this game, aside from the people that refuse to touch the campaign because it was in the future. But from the people that actually played it, apparently campaign is amazing. Now let's move on to zombies, which I do have a decent amount of experience with. I think this is actually the most zombies I've played was in Infinite Warfare compared to previous Call of Duty games. And I personally think they did an amazing job with this. I know there's a lot of Treyarch fans out there that love Treyarch zombies, and they really disliked how Infinite Warfare zombies didn't really take itself too seriously. It was kind of cartoony and stuff like that. But that's actually what I like about this. I like that they didn't just try to straight up copy Treyarch and go with that same sort of theme that Treyarch has. They took Treyarch's core gameplay elements, which work and which a ton of people absolutely love, and they built their own game around those core elements. They made it their own, they made it unique without straying too far from that formula that people love, and that was amazing. They generated a fun and quirky storyline that ranged across various different time periods and themes. I thought it was great. The Easter eggs, I feel like they had a great mix of the Easter eggs. On some of the maps, the Easter eggs were simple enough for somebody like me that is a relatively casual zombies player to understand and actually complete, whereas other ones were difficult enough for those hardcore zombies players to struggle a little bit and get them thinking and work hard to complete that Easter egg. I personally think they nailed zombies this time around. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's video on what Infinite Warfare did right. I'd like to know in the comment section below, since this is the What Infinite Warfare Did Right video rather than What Infinite Warfare Did Wrong video, let's see some positivity down below. Even if you weren't particularly a fan of this game, what do you think Infinite Warfare did right? There will be plenty of time in the other video to talk about all your negative experiences, and of course, like I said, if you disagree with something I said in this video, still feel free to disagree with that. But I want to see some positivity down there. What did you enjoy with Infinite Warfare? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.